We're getting some reaction from the state budget, which was passed over the weekend. We just spoke with Assemblyman Anthony Brindisi, now joined by Assemblyman Marc Butler. Good morning.
Well, good morning to you.
Some reaction to the state budget, $153 billion. I read, Andrew, I don't know if it was the Post or the Democratic Chronicle, said the governor got everything he wanted except for ethics reform. What's your take on the budget?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. This is the governor's budget. A few things were negotiated, but it was very interesting when I was listening to the debate in the Assembly. We went on for several hours, and a majority of that discussion was dominated by the raise the age issue. And, of course, as you know, I've argued that bill should have been separated out from the budget because we spend more time on the budget than we would on raise the age. The opposite turned out to be true. We spent more time on raise the age than we did on the budget. But some of the comments were telling, and I agree with many of the points that Assemblyman Brindisi made. Yes, the budget, a document like that is a compromise, but in my view, it was a compromise between the governor and the even farther to the left New York City Democrats. It wasn't a compromise between us and the governor. It was a compromise between them and the governor. So I voted against this budget. There are a lot of things that I think are hidden in there that as they come to light, people are not going to be particularly pleased about. We get it rammed down our throat at the last minute, so we haven't thoroughly looked through it. I spoke on the floor, and one of the things that concerns me greatly is this whole notion, and I am pleased with the way we came out with the foundation aid money and the school funding, but the way the formula works needs to be fixed. It's not the amount of money we put in the state budget, it's how it's distributed. And the way it's distributed always works against the smaller rural school districts that I represent. Now, the members of the majority, and it was tucked right there in plain sight, and there's probably more, they get this additional grant money called bullet aid. Now, what is your inclination as a politician? You're going to spend that money where you're going to get the most votes in the more urban areas. I'm sure a lot of this money will flow to New York City. So the end result of that, many of the areas I represent, many of the schools I represent will come out poorly on the budget thing, and because I'm in the minority and don't have that kind of access to this additional grant money, they get rooked again. So I think the whole process is lousy. I think the way it was handled this year was horrific. In the hours before we vote, in the hallway, I saw majority members asking each other, what's going on, where are we stand. Wow. It was just a absolute disaster the way this was done, and I think as it evolves, people are going to see that this budget is not as positive as being portrayed.
It didn't get much attention, but what, if anything, was decided when it comes to ethics reform in the budget?
Very little. Perhaps we'll get it as a standalone. I think one of the telling things was there was a provision, it was a simple provision that members who get this discretionary grant funding have to sign some kind of document that the money is going for a bona fide public use. That was negotiated out. Can you imagine? They don't want to be responsible for spending taxpayers' money. They're willing to spend it, but they don't want to have any oversight on it. I think that was one of the issues that was most disturbing. Again, and I know there are positives for us. We had a little kerfuffle about what may be happening at Marcy Nano, but millions of dollars for economic development, and in the final analysis, one of the concerns is that the governor has great personal discretion on how this money is divvied out. I think we saw last year with a number of his aides being indicted. That process has some faults. I would have looked for more oversight, more responsiveness, and some of these programs.
And can we go back to the criminal responsibility? We've only got about a minute left.
Okay.
You talked about how much time was spent debating this issue, that this got more attention than the overall budget itself.
It seemed that way, yes.
Where was Where was the agreement reached, and what is the rule now? What is the law now?
Well, the agreement was reached by the three men locked in the back room, which is what, again, I strongly object to. It is a little bit, there were some adjustments to what the governor had originally proposed, and it's very complex. If you're 16 and 17 and you get charged with a serious crime, apparently there is a process where you can claim that there were extenuating circumstances that should bring you out of criminal court and into family court, where I presume the adjudication would be much better, would be more towards probation and those types of treatments, trying to save the child rather than commit them to a life of crime by putting them in jail. I certainly support the concept, but I think some of the guidelines here are a little vague, and ultimately this is going to be yet another unfunded mandate on our counties trying to, they'll need additional court personnel, additional probation personnel.
Sure.
There's talking about building some facilities to hold these younger people different than a regular prison, so there's a cost involved there. A lot of that was laid out there, but very few specifics. I think about $110 million in there for the so-called facilities that they want to see constructed.
All right. Assemblyman Marc Butler, one of the Republican Assembly members voting against the budget, which was agreed upon over the weekend. Thanks for your time this morning.
Well, just one clarification. I voted against major sections of it, not against everything. I mean,
okay.
I looked at each bill individually. There was, as Mr. Brindisi said, some good, and I felt a lot of bad. But I did vote against the major. We call it the big ugly, the revenue, and all the bill they threw all these additional things into.
But you did vote for the budget.
Well, we get it in various sections. We voted over the week, so I voted for a couple of budget bills and against most of them, and primarily voted against this final piece here that had all the revenues, how we're going to raise taxes, and all those kinds of things. They had a lot of these issues in it that I object to.
All right. Assemblyman Marc Butler, thanks for your time this morning.
All right. Thank you.
A quick break. We'll come back with more on WIBX.